It's straightforward, basically. Did somebody join? Yeah. Hi, Aparajita. Uh, I will. The next one is vertical openness and density. So again, you need to use blank lines thoughtfully to separate concepts and lines of code. So if you go back to the code, we don't want to have many blank lines. So it mostly should read like a novel, where you are reading from back to back on the lines. And if there is a new scene that is starting or a new chapter that is starting, you have a blank line behind between it to saying that, what, now we are doing something new, or there's a new paragraph coming in. That's where we give a blank line when we talk about, when we think about reading a book or a novel kind of a thing. Similarly, we do it for code. We don't give any blank spaces unless we need it. Now this blank space is not required, basically we can kind of delete it. But between two methods you want a blank space, so that it kind of delineates that what is a when the method starts and ends. The other aspect is, like, even for this variables that we talked about, like public static. So you kind of give one more thing, because all the public static goes in one group, your private static goes in another group. You don't need this one. And then all the private finals go in different group. So that would kind of separate out concepts around it. And there was another thing, that if your method is longer, or you have two different I'll just open another repo. This one. Hey, Aparajita, by the time this kind of loads, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah. I'm Aprajita. I'm from India, and currently I'm working as a software developer in Microsoft. Like I recently joined.
Nice. Yeah, good. Welcome to the community.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to meet you all.
So, yeah, just getting back into this. So, now you have this particular method. It's called upload small files. And now, if I made the only thing that I was trying to come at is, like, this particular piece of code is pretty dense, and then because you have this file heap, okay, I'll just wait for my processor to load. Yeah. So there can be scenarios where you have a long, big methods. Did I do something? Yeah. There can be a scenario when you have big methods, and in that scenario, so your method might do step one, then it does step two and step three. So in those scenarios, you can kind of you know separate the step one and step two and step three in a different lines. So you can give a space between a method. But then, if you have that kind of a scenario, you might as well think, like, can you not, convert them into one, separate methods? So that's another aspect of it. But yeah, if you want to separate out certain small concepts, you can kind of add a single line, so that uh, yeah, one particular steps remain grouped together. Then there is a second piece that comes out, and then there's a third piece coming out. So that's another way of adding bit of more blank spaces. But yeah, if you do overdo it, if you have blank spaces after every line, it becomes hard to read. Like, why are there so many blank spaces? You start asking that question. So that's the gist of this particular openness and density. Any thoughts?
Oh, the idea of like kind of blank spaces are separating concepts. What is with clean code? I guess I'll ask, what is our expectation around comments? And like, when is commenting appropriate? When is it just making it harder to read? And sort of like separation of concerns between methods or variables and other types of things. Is it sort of the expectation that it's linear? I mean, it isn't always this way, I suppose, when I read code, but is the expectation as I move down the file, it's linearly? I should sort of be able to build conceptually as I'm moving through the file to understand how the program works. You know what I mean?
So one question you asked about commenting.
Yeah.
So the comments. Yeah. So this is a yeah. So I mean, we covered it in the last session on commenting. But just to tell you, to the gist of the commenting is that it should only be added to explain the why. So your code should kind of talk to the code should be written in such a way so that you don't need to write comments. So for example, you use a method like upload small files. So by just reading that, you know that it's going to upload a small file. So then, I mean, basically this comment doesn't may not, it might be redundant. You don't need this comment.
Right.
So yeah, if you give expressive method names or variable names, it will kind of tell you you don't need comment for it. You don't need to a comment to explain it. But there are certain scenarios where you don't understand certain things.
Yeah.
Or you want to explain why you have done it. So in that scenario, you kind of explain it. So I think this is why this particular piece of comment, like kind of I try to explain it, saying that you know, this is what it starts and then it appends and finish, and this happens in this way. So that, yeah, because otherwise people might read through, they might understand what's happening, but then they will ask, you know what, why are we doing this? So so that's where
algorithms can be a little tricky to make sense of sometimes.
Yeah. So that's where you would add comments, but otherwise you try to avoid comments as much as possible. And yeah, what are the second part of the question? You talked about the code understanding linearly and other part. I didn't get that.
I guess sort of like this is something I've sort of wondered and almost struggled with when I'm structuring my code. And sometimes reading other people's code. So one thing is within a single file, say that it's like just one little server app file and it does everything in the file, is best practice then to have, like, when I read the program, like the methods and the variables, methods, concepts, they all kind of build on top of each other as I move down the file, so that when I get to the bottom of the file, it's like the program needs this last piece to successfully run or something like that. I guess it's like how, because what you're describing, we're almost structuring by like the type of thing, right? And that totally makes sense in practice. I just need the public thing, put that at the top so I can read it. But that's the other thing that kind of comes up for me if I'm trying to understand how it works.
So easier question, like so for example, you have a particular class and it has to do like 10 different things,
right?
And it does all the 10 different things in the same class, and then you are saying that you want to read all of them together in that particular class, right? Is that something?
Right.
Is that, yeah,
right?
So so what we generally do is for example, this is like a very common scenario where you have a particular class which does 10 things, or the code itself, the business process makes you do 10 different things, and they do it in different order. So generally what one of the things that I do is like I just call them like an orchestration class,
Mhm.
and then it does different operations within that orchestration, like step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then what I do is those steps, what has to be done, either I create a different method or create a different class for those operations,
Mhm.
so that the operation class looks small, and all the complexity within each of the steps go is abstracted to another class or a method.
Mhm.
What that also does is, then what I can do is, at any point of time, I can write my unit test or test for those different steps separately.
Right.
And in the orchestration class, I just test the orchestration whether it goes to all the 10 steps or not.
Yeah.
So then the code becomes modular, and obviously there will be a little bit more. The number of classes will be more depending on the number of steps. But then if somebody has to get a snapshot view, or they can just see that orchestral class, they can get the entire view. And whenever they want to go deeper, they can go into different abstractions and so on. So that's how you kind of manage that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for the explanation. And one final question.
Yep.
Sorry. So
Yep.
you've organized privates and publics together within my list of private methods. Then, if I'm ordering my private methods, am I kind of doing that in maybe order of it, how it might run in the process?
Yeah. So what you generally tend to do is you kind of group. It will come. It's one of the point that we are going to touch on in the next few
Okay.
slides. Yeah. Basically, we kind of group them together. I'll go to the forward and then just.
Okay.
Good questions, man. What is the next one? Come on. Yeah. Again, the indentation. Yeah, it's again pretty straightforward. You need to ensure that indentations are there for each level. So yeah, if you have a lot of if else, you kind of want to keep those indentations correctly, so that I'll just expand this all. Yeah. So ensure that all of the indentations are in the same. So yeah, anybody can understand. But there are no if cases in this kind of a class. But if there are, let me open one of the bigger classes. So yeah, you kind of ensure that all of the indentations are like consistent. The main idea is having consistency, and you just pick a pattern and follow that pattern. So here you have multiple for loops, and then there is another if condition inside that. So yeah, so this, by just looking at it, you kind of know how the code is structured. So that just ensure that happens. And yeah, then I'll quickly. So this is team rules. As I said earlier, that whenever as a team, you kind of set up a consistent formatting style, and ensure that you like everybody follows that standard, because then all the code will look consistent, and nobody has to wrap around. One of the things that IntelliJ does provide, it has this option of setting up your coding styles, and you can set this up. There are other options as well, so you can kind of add more details, like how do you want to do it, line spacing and everything. So and then you can commit into your repository. So what that does is, like, everybody will get this, and then if I do I can do reformat code, refactor and code, and I just do a reformat. It will automatically reformat it based upon whatever that XML is set, whatever the style I've mentioned, style config. So that's very useful for do it in teams. Like if you have 5 developer team or 10 developer team, they will all use the same style config by checking that particular XML into your repository. So that's one of the things you can do. Break indentation rules. Yeah. So again, sometimes you can break it. Now this is little bit tricky because I mean, what is readable to you may not be readable to other person. So yeah, if there is any discussion around it, yeah, just take a view from different people and try to implement it. There is no right or wrong here. Everybody, uh, I mean, there can be multiple ways to do the same thing in code. So yeah, it's basically a discussion that you would want to have with your team as to, yeah. So one of the things, like this particular class, if you had more variables, I could have taken it to the next, scrolled more right. For some reason, I would feel that that would make more sense. Then I would go with that. So it's the important thing is that you need to balance between strict adherence to rules and practical readability. So the rules are there as a guide. So we just need to be aware that if you follow 80% of the time, the rules are okay to follow, but like 20% of the time, rules will we found, they doesn't make sense. So if it doesn't make sense, yeah, just then don't do it. Uh, yeah. Again, this alignment is similar to what, if the code is aligned, you can kind of read through it very quickly. But if it's not aligned, obviously you'll get struggle with that. So, so it's all, the whole objective is that we are trying to make the code more readable. Because in the first slide, as I said, we read more than 100 times compared to the number of times we write. So we just write like one time the code, but it's being read by so many people at so many times of time. Scope lines. So scope lines are your braces. Yeah, just again with the braces, there are two types of braces people follow. There is one with the method name, and the people also follow with in this particular structure as well. So there are two types. This again depends on your team, how your team structured. I don't follow the other one. I just follow this one right now, having it along with the method. It's easier for me, but that's again a team decision that you would go and decide. But yeah, the other aspect is once it's decided, just ensure you follow it. You can kind of put that in your config XML as well, so that it will always reformat it in this particular fashion. But the default is it will add it with brace at the end of a for loop or a method or a class. Yeah, this conceptual affinity. This is what I was going to come at. I think Jacob, your question was there around this. Like, how do I set all my private methods? How do I order my private methods, right? So when you have a lot of private methods, what you try to do is, so for example, this accept file transfer request is your public method, and what it is using is get LBID, and then it uses map to entity, and then it uses upload file recorder. The three methods is being used. So we try to keep all of those private methods for that for this public method. I try to group all of the private methods together and in the same order where they are being used. So first it comes get LBID, so then I use get LBID first. Second is map to entity. Then you try to keep map to entity and update file record. So yeah, so that way, if anybody wants to read all of the groupings together, they can kind of group them and read to all of them together, and in the same order. Yeah.
And then if there isn't necessarily like an order that is happening, but rather it's a set of methods that are kind of CRUD methods or something like that. They're almost categorical. Do you maybe order it in order of the acronym CRUD or something like that? Like create this object or pull this object, or do you maybe want to start with like first get, then set, update, delete, like?
I mean that's okay. I mean that's like a personal preference.
Okay.
Yeah, because that would anything works in that scenario. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's by the name, it's pretty evident. So you don't, people, the moment people reads it, they will kind of get it. And then classes and file. Yeah, this is a tricky thing. How do I keep a long file short and so on, or a long method? So it has got different ways to look at it. One way is like, as I told, like when you have that orchestrator class, which has got a lot of steps, your class is by default going to be big. But then you can kind of break it out and this is where kind of unit tests helps you because when you try to write unit test, that's when you will find that you can break this chunk of code into one different operation, and then you can write only unit test specific for those operation in a different class. And that's one of the advantages of writing that unit test. Like, yeah, I mean, all the other advantages, apart from all the other advantages, it tries because you those unit tests will make your code modular. It will show you the groupings which you may not see when you are writing the code, but when you are trying to test it, it will try to give out the modularity. Because just imagine a scenario where you have an orchestrator class with everything inside that particular class, and you're trying to test step number 5. So when you have to write a test for step number 5, you have to assume things for step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, step number 4. And within the step number 5, there are 10 scenarios. So you'll write 10 test cases for step number 5. But then for all of those 10 scenarios, you have to mock step number 1, step number 2, step 3, step 4. Then even after the step 5, I have to mock step 6, step 7, so that the entire method gets executed, and then I'm only testing the step 5. So in those scenarios, then you can see that because you're writing so many duplicate code just to get that step 5, instead of doing that, you just pull that out into a different class, and then do that testing. So when you do, so then you're only testing step 5. You don't need to worry about step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So yeah, that would, if you are able to, because you're writing those tests, that will the test will bring that clarity if you don't get the clarity the first time around when you're writing the whole class. So that's another advantage of writing those unit tests. Any thoughts?
I think the thing that kind of comes up where, like from a directory point of view,
Yeah.
that's what comes up for me when we bring up testing, because I've worked on projects where, we're starting to make this breakout, here's a path for tests for these methods in this class or something like that. And but then the rest of the tests all live in this one folder just called tests or something. So I think that's the thing that comes up for me. Like, is it now a good time to talk about best practices in your directory structure, or should we wait and talk about that a little later?
Yeah, I mean, just on a high level, right? So for example, if you look at directory structure, I'll just touch upon it. I will not go deep. So like for this kind of a project, which is like this is a Java Spring Boot project. And in that, we do have a specific, like the framework itself advises that you kind of create a controller class, create a service class, a service package, I mean the directory, and then you also have a model one where you put your models in. So this is like a little bit of a framework that, which we get it from the framework, and this is like a model that like everybody follows, whoever is doing Java Spring Boot. And then that's where you kind of like all the exceptions, you group it into another directory. And like if there's some job that's running, so we put a job so that we know these are the list of jobs. And so this is a structure that partly it is part of the framework, and that has evolved, that was evolved because of the previous iteration. Whoever has worked on these projects, they kind of came out, okay, this is a way where we are able to do it much cleanly. So that's where we do. But for testing, now if you look at testing also, I would kind of ensure I follow the same format. So I would create a service package and put all the services under that. Yeah, for the application test, it is outside. It is under no package, so I just put without outside everything. So I will try to follow the same model that I have on my main. I will put it in the test. It's very straightforward. People know where to find the test for a particular class.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yep, Max.
What is the job in that context?
So this is a cron job that runs in this particular project.
Task or what?
No, it's a job. It's a bad job. that runs. So it's a scheduler that it runs at a fixed delay, a certain time.
Every 5 minutes.
Yeah. So and then there's another one which runs at a particular interval. It runs at 5 p.m. every day. So these are a couple of jobs that are there.
Okay, thanks.
So it uses Spring Scheduler to do it for you. Yep. All right. Any thoughts? I think I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. The other ones are, the next slide is not related to this. Yeah. So, so, so before leaving, I'll just finish off a few things. So I'll send out the links for the Facebook group. I think she left it, Aparajita. Okay. I was going to, but yeah, I'll send out the links for the Facebook group where I generally put the recordings in, and I'll also send the GitHub link. And yeah, if you guys have got anybody wants to write the takeaways, they can just put it on the Facebook post. And yeah, and this is a new practice that I'm just starting out from today. So you might not find anything else in the group right now, but if you're putting that in, that's you're welcome and much appreciated for that. And yeah, I'll push it into the GitHub as well, and yeah, I'll see how it goes. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts before we close this call?
So I downloaded the clean code PDF. Are we roughly going through this sort of class chapter by chapter, or where would you say we're at in the book?
Yeah, we are going by chapter. So we are number 5. That's, I think, formatting.
Yep, got it. Okay.
So we're going through like chapter by, but yeah, I mean, some of the sessions we might not cover the entire chapter because I think the future chapters are pretty big.
Right.
Some of them are big, so we might not cover the entire thing. But yeah, right now we are just focusing on trying to go chapter by chapter.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Thanks all. And if you have any feedback, let me know by email or something. Then I can kind of fine tune it or make it better. Yeah.
Awesome. Great to
All
meet
right.
you, Dishit.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
all.
much.
Thanks. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Have a great week.
Yeah. You all.